Many Australians have more or less embraced their convict history. But if you're an American who had no idea that your country's founding included a huge prison population, you're not alone. Historically, Americans have not been too keen on discussing the fact that convicts came to what will eventually become known as the United States. As Anthony Vaver explains in his book, Bound with an Iron Chain, historians have sought to cover up the fact that so many prisoners were sent to America. Throughout the 19th century, most historians simply ignored the institution, and those who did recognize it usually claimed that nearly all of the people who were transported were political figures. Except that wasn't true. British convicts came over in droves, and free Americans weren't too happy about it. In fact, even before the Transportation Act of 1718 really opened the doors for Britain's dumping of undesirables in America, some colonies tried to pass laws that would prohibit the practice. In 1670, authorities in Virginia passed an act that prohibited convicts from being sent to that area. This, unsurprisingly, was overruled by the king. So what I'm saying is this: that when I show you these pedophiles in America, the Jeff Epsteins of the world, the Bill Clintons of the world, when I show you the deep state, when all of these criminals, when I show you the fact that J.P. Morgan is pulling up to Philadelphia with tons of cocaine, when I show you that they're organ harvesting, that sex trafficking and human trafficking has taken over drug trafficking, when I show you all of these heinous things that are taking place on the dark web, when I show you when I show you the nature of this man that you call superior, I want you to know that their foundation and where they come from, the KKK, the people who lynched our peoples, because like I said earlier, as soon as they sent these undesirables to America, that's when you see the lynching of black people, of not just regular black people, business owner, landowners. That's when you see the quote unquote the extermination of the Indians. That's when they ride west for manifest destiny. That's when they go and they murder in the name of the quote unquote, not just the crown right now. They're murdering in the name of Europeans. They're murdering in the name of manifest destiny, meaning that these motherfuckers came here homeless. They came here as criminals. They came here as convicts. And they already had it in their minds to get busy and to kill by any means necessary in the name of, manifest destiny, the doctrine of discovery, all of that shit. These are the same people that niggas have the nerve to look up to and to bow down to. And a lot of our people is on their knees too. So here we have the symbol of American hierarchy, right? Where white people and LBGTQRSTVUP people are at the top, and Jewish is sitting nestled. They're the guardians. They're like the what they call the boule of the black people were the boule. They're the guarders of they're like the fucking hound dogs or the watchdogs of greater society, or what they call dominant society and things of that nature. So the work that Jewish people, Ashkenazis and whatnot, the kind of work that they've done, that they've put in by being ledgers, by the secret relationships between blacks and Jews and whatnot, with the slave trade, with the proliferation, with them controlling Hollywood, media, which is a weapon of America and whatnot. They've gotten into a higher position on this hierarchy. They are the caretakers of the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Right under that is the Middle Eastern and the Asian and the Indian. Right under that is the Hispanic and black immigrants. Right under that are black American women. And on the tippy bottom of that pyramid is black American men. At the bottom of the pyramid, okay? At the very bottom, at the absolute bottom is niggas, black men in America. Okay? And to show you, and for the family on this watching this on the gram, we are doing a Into Deep lecture. If you want to see the lecture, the physical lecture, you're gonna have to hit me on the inbox with the email, and I'll walk you through it. Here we go. Just last week in Tennessee, how many family out there is from Tennessee? Or like Young Buck said, Tennessee. The same place where they were auctioning off black people during that goddamn draft, right? Tennessee. Governor Bill Lee signs Nathan Bedford Forest Day proclamation, right? And Nathan Bedford Forest Day is one of the founders of the KKK. Tennessee is honoring Nathan Bedford Forrest, a slave trader, Confederate general, and Ku Klux Klan leader today. According to a state law, the Republican Governor Bill Lee and his predecessors have kept into place. Despite recent controversy around Confederate monuments across the country, the state of Tennessee is today celebrating Forrest, a man who took part in slaughtering African Americans after the Civil War, as the leader of the KKK, and whose bust still sits in the Tennessee state capitol. According to a Tennessee law, each year the governor must sign proclamations for 6 state holidays, including one for Forrest and one for the Confederate Army leader Robert E. Lee. The proclamation signed by Lee, right? The governor's name is Lee, and then we have Robert E. Lee, who's the big homie, who's the motherfucking Hitler of the Confederates. The proclamation signed by Lee and Republican Governor Bill Haslam before him calls Bedford a recognized military figure in American history and a native Tennessean, and encourages citizens to join the governor in this worthy observance. Lee said he signed the proclamation in accordance with state law and declined to say if he believes the law should change, according to the Tennessean. Lee has defended the presence of the Forrest statue in the Capitol in the past, saying that removing it would whitewash history. Nearly 4 decades ago, as a college student at Auburn University, right? Isn't Auburn? No, that's the other one. Auburn is where the sports players is playing. That's like a big sports team. So we would have to have the sports players fuck bending the knee. You niggas can't even lace up your boots and come out and play until they remove that goddamn statue in that holiday. Nearly 4 decades ago, as a college student at Auburn University, Lee participated in Old South parties and is pictured in his yearbook dressed as a Confederate soldier, a common costume for members his fraternity, which called Robert E. Lee its spiritual founder, aka Big Homie, aka Master Teacher, aka Sith Lord. This is the governor who's sending niggas up the river right now. If you live in Tennessee, you niggas need to move. That's a fact. Forrest was you could stay if you want. You could participate in paying them taxes. You could participate in laying up in that state. You could participate in a chain gang. But don't complain. Nigga, don't come boo-hooing when they turn up and they wash niggas. Yeah, it been that way. But what you gonna do to change it? Forrest, right? Forrest, the person who the holiday is named after, was a cotton plantation owner and a slave trader before joining the Confederate Army. In 1864, troops under his command as a general massacred mostly black Union soldiers after they surrendered. The Fort Pillow Massacre rallied Union troops at the time and is remembered in history books as a war crime. After the Civil War, Forrest was elected the first Grand Wizard of the KKK, which used violence and terrorism to suppress African Americans and stop black people from voting in the 1868 elections. Now, I'm not no rebel rouser, but, and I can't say it too much because I'm on social media and niggas is telling these days, but I wish you niggas understood Pig Latin, because I would tell you that it's time to art stay the ayat ray and air tay that 8 stay ound day, earn bay that other sucker and burn that bitch down. You know what I'm talking about? Because you cannot exist. You cannot act like your Black Lives Matter. You cannot live in peace. You can't pray. You can't wake up every Sunday to go and pray to Caesar Bourgeois living in Tennessee, thinking that he finna save your ass, when he's the same deity and the entity and the egregor that nigga was, that they was killing people in Fort Pillow and sending black people up. You ever been to a ritual where they killed a rooster or a chicken? Well, that's the same, cutting heads off and sending you up and chopping you in 4 pieces and cutting your phallus off. It's the same ritual that Cubans, Dominicans, Jamaicans, Africans do when they doing obia, voodoo, palo mayombe, all of these fucking spiritual, practices. You think the white boy don't do the same thing? The difference is he has slaughterhouses, so he's killing 10,000 chickens. He's killing 10,000 pigs, and he lynching niggas. He's kidnapping little girls, little boys, and they're cutting them into pieces. And they're in the blood libel that the Jews used to practice, where they basically hang a child upside down and cut their throat, and the blood drips out, and they basically drain it the same way that they drain the animals in kosher meat, where they have an art of draining the blood out of the animal before they eat it. Well, they were rumored and they had been speculating, and they used to pack them up and chase them out of countries because of what they were doing with the children. They doing that to this day. Okay? The governor belongs to a fraternity, right? At the same time, the governor said he regretted going to Old South parties at Auburn University as part of the fraternity Kappa Alpha Order, which reportedly sees Confederate Army General Robert E. Lee as a spiritual founder. I need somebody to go and do research who on the football team is in that fraternity, okay? So you could begin to call them out and you could blow it up. We need to send DMs, emails, and you niggas need to add all of the black players on Auburn football team, because there's people out here, you niggas is religious with that football shit. You know everybody's name, you know their position, you know what high school they came from, you know all of the stats. Well, I bet you know their Twitter handles too. You should send either this lecture or these articles to them and say to them, brother, raise some issues. Go and see if there's a black student union in Auburn. Shut down the fraternity. Okay? That's an easy target. The governor's hands aren't tied in signing such a proclamation. As the Holler points out, plenty of the governors have declined to sign them in the past, especially on proclamations that they don't personally agree with. In January, Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts refused to sign a proclamation in honor of the book, This Blessed Earth, A Year in the Life of an American Family Farm, by journalist Ted Gonaways, because it contained criticism of President Donald Trump. So they not held to sign proclamations. They doing it because they want to. Okay? Here's the issues. You could go and Google it. Grand Wizard, Tennessee State Holiday. The shit just happened. The same day that they found the beloved goddess Mama Sadie in her trunk in New Orleans, strangled to death. July the 12th was around the same time in Tennessee, because Louisiana is a hotbed of KKK. Louisiana is like the fucking headquarters of the KKK, right? So when they sign proclamations like this, them crackers go and kill niggas. They shed blood. They send a nigga up. You know what I'm talking about? It's all ritual. It's how they stay in power. Go and research American gods. You got to feed the gods blood. You got to feed the gods fire. You have to feed your gods, especially if the god is a demon. Especially if you're feeding some demons. You got to feed them what they want blood. They want a body. And they want high-ranking bodies. That's why when the KKK were lynching, they were lynching pastors, they were lynching business owners, they was lynching niggas who was lit in the community, popular niggas. They called them uppity Negroes. They was lynching free black men. They were lynching Moors. They was lynching indigenous people. They was lynching, tough niggas who was like, white people can't say shit to me. They was lynching black men who was swirling. You know what I'm talking about? The ones who the white woman was running after. So they were feeding their gods worthy sacrifices. Not no regular random nigga. They was feeding them big targets. Not soft targets, hard targets. To whereas they could celebrate at the end like, yo, we took down a big one. So when all of this conversation about all of this supremacy, niggas is low key, teabagging the white man, because that's what our people be doing. Let's just keep it a buck. You know what I mean? It's soft porn. You know what I'm saying? And all of these marches that I've been seeing on a lot of these YouTube channels, and when you hear the rhetoric, it's really not. Like when you really peel it back, niggas is just massaging white people's scrotum sacks. Like they really just lap dancing these white people because they really don't got no smoke for them. You know what I mean? They give them all the credit in the world. They give them all they make them seem like they're mighty and powerful and these fucking giants that you have to, like Goliaths. They speak about their intellect. You know what I mean? It's just goddamn. What are you niggas is cheerleaders? But one of the things that our people never factor in, because we're not taught this into school, is that the white man's culture is the culture that I just showed you that he came with on those ships when they flushed the prisons of him. That the only culture he got is gonorrhea, syphilis, bestiality, pedophilia, homosexuality, right? Land grabbing, speaking with a forked tongue, Damo, what I gave you the definition in the beginning of this lecture, Damo, which is domination. From a Roman perspective, that's their marching orders, that's their culture, is to dominate, okay? And take dominion over people who are basically meek or less gangster or less savage than them, because in warfare, he who was more savage wins the war. We were so powerful. We were not as savage as the European. You know what I'm talking about? You ever been to war, nigga? You ever been to war on your block? You ever had a fight in a schoolyard? You know what I'm talking about? You ever knuckled up? The nigga who bites and kick nuts, he wins the fight. The motherfucker who digs eyes out and scratches and cheats and whatnot, has the razor tucked and whatnot, and will cut you when you're not looking. Look at my arm. My shit got cut. I got 156 stitches by somebody who wanted to fight dirty. We was squaring up, going at it. You know what I mean? And when he was losing, that nigga dug in. It looked like he dug in his ass or something, but he dug in his back and he pulled out a banana razor and tried to cut my face, and we wasn't having that. So my arm got sacrificed so my face could stay the way it is. You know what I'm talking about? And cut me, he did. He kept cutting me. You know what I mean? But he who fights dirty, the one who, so the Europeans were war. They were fighting for 800 years in Europe against the Moors. So they were war ready. They were war. They were war. Not war torn. They were basically born into war. You had generations of European born into the war. So they were war ready. And you come to the Americas, if you see the pictures of the Americas was like paradise. Women was walking around with their boobs out. They had people with gold necklaces. Look at this. They had shit like this, cuffs, all gold. Neck, breastplates, all gold. Women had their breast out. I don't want to say tits and offend nobody, but women were showing their derriere. You ever seen, like, I seen a lot of memes where they reposting Rihanna and she's in her carnival garb, right? They got Rihanna in her carnival garb, right? Did you ever ask yourself, where the fuck does that carnival shit come from? It didn't come post-slavery. They didn't get all of those colorful feathers. The same feathers that they wearing in Mardi Gras, the same feathers in New Orleans. Is that post-slavery? No, that's before slavery. When they came into the Americas, our people was colorful like that. Our people were, you see how they half dressed at the carnival? They was half dressed. Nigga, it was 100 degrees in New York right now. I felt like going outside butt naked. So if you read the journal, if you take time out and you really about that life and you not a YouTube scholar and you go and you read the journals and you translate the journals, go get you a goddamn Spaniard or somebody who's from France. Had them, or a fucking German, sit them down and feed them some goddamn kale salad and have them translate that shit for you. Because all of the information is in those journals. In the journals, they describe what the fuck they saw when they got off them ships. This is the European talking. They was like, yo, they were copper tone complexion people covered in gold. They titties was out. The chiefs were bringing us women by the dozens. You understand? But the European was so filthy and dirty that when they were bedding these women, they were killing them like overnight. What kind of filth you gotta have to kill some people when you skeeting? What's going on? Talk black to me. What kind of filth you gotta have where you killing somebody on contact? I mean, I've been around. I'm in New York, so the homeless epidemic is off the chain. I've been around some homeless people. I be on a train when they walk through. You know what I mean? They say that you can't hold your breath for more than 5 minutes. If that nigga's walking slow, I'm turning blue because I'm holding it all in. You know what I mean? I don't want to. It feels like his ionosphere has all kind of fucking, you know, the ionosphere is fucked up. You know what I mean? When they walk through, it's like the nigga from Charlie Brown, Limus in them. So how dirty did the human beings have to be where they were killing the natives on contact? Okay. Anyway, I'm saying all of this to say that the American Constitution and everything that they received that has niggas lap dancing Europeans as if they are the like they're the second coming. All of that, you know, because you got these bed wenches and these coons and whatnot. They're like, oh, what about the European? What about democracy? And what about the founding fathers? And what about the way that they set this up? Like, look at how everything is so organized, especially niggas coming from outside of America, from shanty towns into the USA and whatnot. They say, oh my goodness, there's running water and electricity, and you know, the white man is great. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, the fucking Aztecs or the Latin Americans, they you know, they looking at the white man like the second coming of what was his name? Quetzalcoatl. And that's not what this shit is. Their claim to fame is that they absorb cultures and they steal from cultures and they adapt cultures and they make it their own. You know what I'm saying? And because the people don't have knowledge like that, they are then what? They're susceptible to they get assimilated, they get taught in their schools, they get lied to, they get tricked, they get rocked to sleep, they get this version of history, this his story, and now niggas is walking around in their pineal, in their third eye, because we create reality, we give power, we put people in certain positions, we are the original people of the planet, so we the ones running this shit. In our minds, all is mental. But if you looking at this man like he's 100 feet tall and you praying to his gods, Noble Drew Ali said, give the European back their gods. Niggas, you're going to have to kill these niggas before they give back the gods. Much has been said about the inspiration of the ancient Iroquois Great League of Peace and planting the seeds that led to the formation of the United States of America and its representative democracy. The Iroquois Confederacy, founded by the great peacemaker in 1142, is the oldest living participatory democracy on earth. I'm going to repeat that. The Iroquois Confederacy, founded by the great peacemaker in 1142, is the oldest living participatory democracy on earth. In 1988, the U.S. Senate, could somebody mute their phone, please? Because I'm hearing feedback. Please mute your phone. Thank you. In 1988, the U.S. Senate paid tribute with a resolution that said the Confederation of the original 13 colonies let me go back because I was distracted. In 1988, the U.S. Senate paid tribute with a resolution that said the Confederation of the original 13 colonies into one republic was influenced by the political system developed by the Iroquois Confederacy, as were many of the democratic principles which were incorporated into the Constitution itself. The peoples of the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Six Nations, refer to themselves as the Haudenosaunee. It means peoples of the Longhouse and refers to their lengthy bark-covered longhouses that housed many families. Theirs was a sophisticated and thriving society of well over 5,000 people when the first European explorers encountered them in the early 17th century. The Iroquois Confederacy originally consisted of 5 separate nations: the Mohawks, who call themselves, I can't pronounce that, people of the Flint Country; the Onondaga, people of the hills; the Cayuga, remember, you know the show Cayuga that the little kids watch? The Cayuga, where they land the boats; the Oneida, people of the Standing Stone; and the Seneca, the people of the Big Hill, living in the northeast region of North America. Right? Remember, Seneca Village is Central Park in New York City, which was melanated. Okay? Which was melanated. These are not Tonto Indians. These are not $5 Indians that we're talking about. These are aboriginals. These are indigenous. Okay? They had inner tribal conflicts. The nations of the Iroquois had been enmeshed in continuous inner tribal conflicts. The cost of war was high and had weakened their society. The great peacemaker and the wise Hiawatha, chief of the Onondaga tribe, contemplated how best to bring peace between the nations. They traveled to each of the 5 nations to share their ideas for peace. A council meeting was called, and Hiawatha presented the great law of peace. It united the 5 nations into a League of Nations, or the Iroquois Confederacy, and became the basis for the Iroquois Confederacy Constitution. Where did you hear League of Nations? That's what the United Nations was before, was the United Nations. So how is these people savage? How did you conquer the Indians and have to subdue them and subjugate them? Because you said that they were savages. Yet and still, your Constitution, your democracy, everything that the United States of America is built on is built off of swagger jacking these people. Talk black to me. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? Of course, the Five Nations carried the L, the Bay, and all of that. These people were integrated with Moorish principles and Islamic principles and all kind of stuff. We have a 600-page Moorish lecture that we will be presenting in this same kind of series that we're doing on this live stream, where we're building with the people and we're creating content and we're teaching the people. That one, that's my magnus opus. And in that one, we're going to break down and we're going to go into deeper detail. I'm breezing over information because, like I said, we got to cover a lot of ground tonight. Okay? Yeah, I hope you are there for that. Right? Like I said, anybody that wants to see this lecture, you want to participate in this lecture, you know what I'm saying? Hit me on my DM, you know what I mean? And I will let you know how you could participate in viewing this, alright? Because after this hour on Instagram, we won't be coming back, alright? Deep state. Let's get into the deep state, okay? Like I said earlier with my disclaimer, we're going to be touching on some very uncomfortable truths. If you have a weak stomach, if you don't want to hear about child prostitution, if you don't want to hear about children being murdered for their adrenochrome, if you don't want to hear about a lot of the homosexual practices with these state senators and politicians, well, goddamn it, go and watch Housewives. You know what I'm talking about? Go do that, because this is not for you. You know what I'm talking about? This is not for you, because we got to get to some uncomfortable truths. And I'm going to keep it very professional so you could show this to the children. I'm not going to be going crazy with the curse words, even though they say fuck shit and all of that other shit when you know, either around you or when you're not around. But that's no justification for, you know, I don't want to get all crazy with it. So I want them to learn. So, you know, we'll be responsible with the language. Okay? That's a disclaimer. Omaha. Okay? For all of my people in Omaha, have you ever heard of Larry King? Okay? And we're not talking about Larry King from the Larry King, the old white weird looking dude that had the talk show. We're talking about a brother who looked like that nigga from Atlanta who got the radio show. What's his name? If anybody knows what I'm talking about, you know, he was on, I think he was on Love and Hip Hop. Weird looking nigga. But anyway, Lawrence E. King Jr., everyone now agreed, had a remarkable knack for stretching the dollar. On a salary of only $16,200 a year. God damn it, that nigga was struggling. 16 a year? I know bums that make, I know homeless people that make more than that. But on a salary of 16 racks, the credit, I know people that throw 16 a night collectively in the club. On a salary of 16 racks, the credit union manager drove a $70,000 white Mercedes and still could afford to spend $10,000 a month in limousines. His credit card charges toppled $1 million. He owned a 4-story house on 26 acres overlooking the Missouri River. That nigga almost had his 40 acres. And his floral bill alone came to $146,000 during a fragrant 13-month period in 1987 to 88. This nigga was ordering flowers by the dozens. I wish I had his plug. I could be sending a lot of bouquets out. You know what I'm talking about? A former McGovern Democrat who converted to the GOP, King threw a $100,000 party for 1,000 close friends at the Republican National Convention in New Orleans 2 years ago, leasing a warehouse used to store Mardi Gras floats. 4 years earlier, before singing the Star Spangled Banner at the Republican Convention in Texas, he hosted a similar bash by renting South Fork, a ranch used to film Dallas. When visiting Los Angeles, King preferred a 2-story suite at Beverly Wilshire Hotel. In Washington, he paid $5,000 a month to occupy a palazzo on California Street next to the Venezuelan embassy. A federal jury this summer will decide whether King, 45, is guilty as charged of looting $38 million from the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in a predominantly black neighborhood of North Omaha. But it isn't Larry King's finances that have Nebraska in a Great Plains pother. Last week, a county grand jury under the direction of a special prosecutor began sifting through allegations of child sexual abuse. Okay? He liked them boys. Let's listen to the Becky.
One of the grimmest.
Hold on. If anybody knows about the boys, what's that? The Boys Town, the Boys
examples
Town.
of heinous crimes, institutional corruption, and abuse of political power is said to have occurred back in the mid to late 1980s in the heartland of America, and it is known as the Franklin Conspiracy or the Franklin Cover-Up. The conspiracy involved a child pedophilia ring allegedly involving prominent politicians and business leaders in the Omaha, Nebraska area, with ties leading all the way to some of the most powerful circles in Washington, D.C. Journalist Nick Bryan has been following and studying this tragic, mysterious, and controversial case for over a decade and wrote a book entitled The Franklin Scandal about his investigation. Sean Stone recently sat down with Bryan and asked him to briefly outline some of his findings.
The Franklin Scandal is about an interstate pedophile network that flew children from coast to coast and pandered them to very rich and powerful individuals. And there was a house in Washington, D.C., where a lot of the children were flown to, and then in the house in Washington, D.C., there would be like pedophilic parties, pedophilic orgy.
Hold on, I'm sorry.
One of the grimmest and most disturbing.
The internet, and it was this. Was told that lead investigator of the state is the Nebraska, and the Franklin Scandal is about an interstate pedophile network that flew children from coast to coast and pandered them to very rich and powerful individuals. And there was a house in Washington, D.C., where a lot of the children were flown to, and then in the house in Washington, D.C., there would be like pedophilic parties, pedophilic orgies. And this house was wired for audiovisual blackmail by a CIA asset named Craig Spence. So ultimately what happened with the Franklin Scandal is the Nebraska Senate found out about Lawrence E. King, who was one of the pimps in this pedophile network, and started to dig into this and investigate it. And what happened was the state and both the federal government just came after the senators really, really hard. There was a couple of corrupt grand juries that said that there wasn't a pedophile network. The lead investigator of the Senate subcommittee, his plane mysteriously broke up in midair and he was killed. His son was killed after he'd allegedly uncovered some critical evidence to uncover this pedophile network. So it was a big scandal in the late 80s. And according to a Nebraska senator, he was told that if you followed the breadcrumbs, it would lead to the highest levels of the Republican Party.
Now, are you referring to John DeCamp and when he said that line?
No, I'm referring to Lawrence Schmidt. Because, John DeCamp didn't... he had really nothing to do with the Senate subcommittee. He was just kind of I can tell you about his role, though.
Well, yeah, so I will get into the John DeCamp question.
Yeah.
I think because John DeCamp's book on the Franklin scandal itself, the Franklin cover-up, I believe it was called, was elucidating because John himself was a former Phoenix operative, if I understand, basically within the CIA apparatus in Vietnam, right? He was involved with the Phoenix program, working for William Colby, who became CIA director thereafter. So DeCamp is not an uninformed person to have then investigated this in Nebraska and come up with that first book, which I think inspired some of your research and work.
John DeCamp's book inspired me to go out to Nebraska and check it out. Same with Conspiracy of Silence. Conspiracy of Silence was a documentary that was going to be shown on the Discovery Channel in the UK, and its funding was suddenly, the plug was pulled on it. And it was elucidating the Franklin scandal. And it was going to air in 1995 or 1996. And the Discovery Channel just quashed it. So, and it's floating around the internet now. It's kind of become an internet phenomenon. It's there's a lot of people that have watched Conspiracy of Silence and have watched some other things on the internet, and then ultimately they've read either John DeCamp's book or my book on the Franklin scandal.
Mm-hmm. So again, in terms of your investigation, you basically followed up where the Senate subcommittee ultimately left off, because there were no charges brought against people like Lawrence King on the pedophile matter, correct?
Yes, I had Gary Caradori, who I mentioned previously. He was the investigator for the Senate subcommittee, and he died mysteriously. And I managed to acquire all his investigative reports and all his investigative documentation. I had a list of over 60 victims, and it was up to me to put it all together. I drove around the country looking for victims, and these kids were very, very hard to find. Well, now they're young adults, but a lot of them came from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and they were turned on to drugs. That was a big carrot for these pedophilic pimps, was give the kid drugs, and then so they were turned on to drugs and repeatedly molested. And ultimately, when they reached a point where they weren't marketable anymore, they were expunged by the network. So basically what you have is someone who's from a dysfunctional background, who has a lot of psychological problems, and then they're drug addicts too, or a lot of them are drug addicts, and they end up committing felonies. So they were very difficult to find. They don't use their Social Security number too often.
Absolutely. Well, one of the more famous cases, I think, was Johnny Gosch, and there's been a recent film that you helped produce on the question of who kidnapped Johnny Gosch, because he was the poster child, the first milk carton kid, if I'm correct, and he basically disappeared in the 1980s, and it turns out that he seems to have been trafficked into the same Nebraska pedophile ring, no?
Yes, Paul Benassi, who was one of the kids that was enmeshed in this pedophile network, said that he helped abduct Johnny Gosch. And there's some corroborating evidence that suggests that Paul Benassi did in fact help abduct Johnny Gosch, and he was the first child to appear on a milk carton. And I helped produce a documentary that looked at his abduction and how the police completely dropped the ball on the investigation, because Paul Benassi came forward in the early 1990s. And I think if the police and the FBI had given him any credibility whatsoever, they could have probably found Johnny Gosch. But because the FBI was so concerned about covering up Lawrence King's pedophile network, they couldn't give Paul Benassi any credibility. So ultimately, any leads that were gleaned from Paul Benassi were completely ignored by law enforcement.
So now what levels, I mean, you mentioned previously that essentially these kids were brought to Washington, D.C. for certain pedophile parties. What level could you discern this actually went to as far as political power? I mean, Lawrence King is not someone who's known to most people, but are we talking about politicians that are known to the public?
Absolutely. In my investigation, Senator Schmidt, who headed the Franklin Committee, as I said earlier, was told that a caller told him not to pursue this investigation because it would go to the upper echelons of the Republican Party. And in my investigation, I've seen that it does go to the upper echelons of the Republican Party, and there's also a number of high-ranking Democrats, too. But if one steps back and they look at the power that was deployed to cover this up, okay, you had the Department of Justice in Nebraska, you had a hijacked grand jury in Nebraska, a hijacked state grand jury, and then you had a hijacked federal grand jury. And then in Washington, D.C., you had the Department of Justice and the Secret Service, and also another hijacked grand jury. So you've got strings being pulled from the pinnacle of power to orchestrate this cover-up. And the fact that there's so many people involved in this cover-up really shows just how transcontinental this pedophile network was.
Now, around the same time, in the late 80s, if I'm correct, it was actually before, it was right at the end of, near the end of Reagan's term. The Washington Times had a famous story about basically a homosexual escort ring that was being led into the White House after hours. Is there any indication that this, because obviously homosexuality and pedophilia are two different issues, but is there any connection between this story that broke and the pedophile rings that were
How is
that were no top
homosexuality
ring?
and pedophile different?
The Washington Times articles were boring into this story. They were born into Craig Spence. Craig Spence had the house in Washington, D.C. that was wired for audiovisual blackmail, where a lot of the pedophilic orgies occurred. And he would take male prostitutes and, according to some people, underage prostitutes into the White House for midnight tours. And the person who had to take the fall for that, Craig Spence died under mysterious conditions like a lot of people in the Franklin scandal, but the person who ultimately took the fall for it ran an escort service, a gay escort service. His name was Henry Vincent. And he and I wrote a book called Confessions of a D.C. Madam, in which he gets into dealing with Craig Spence and Larry King and how difficult it was and how malevolent they were. And they pressured him to acquire children for them, and he refused to do that. And he also gets into how he came across Craig Spence's blackmail equipment firsthand. And then the Washington Times report.
All right, we ain't gonna stay too much on that. I'm bringing up, I wanted to share that with y'all about this scandal that took place in the 80s, the Franklin child prostitution ring, okay? To show you the inner workings of these pedophile rings and how they can start somewhere in Omaha, Nebraska, at a group home, at a boys' home, okay? This was very, the Boys Town scandal is big in American history. Many of us were too young to understand what was going on. We probably didn't pay it any attention. But this thing shot all the way up to George Bush's White House. Okay? This was a child prostitution ring coming out of foster care. Allegations in 1988. Authorities looked into allegations that prominent citizens of Nebraska, as well as high-level U.S. politicians, were involved in a child prostitution ring. Alleged abuse victims were interviewed who claimed that children in foster care were flown to the East Coast of the United States to be sexually abused at bad parties. The claims primarily centered on Lawrence E. King, who ran the now defunct Franklin Community Federal Credit Union in Omaha, Nebraska, and alleged the ring was a cult of devil worshippers involved in the mutilation, sacrifice, and cannibalism of numerous children. Numerous conspiracy theories evolved, claiming that the alleged abuse was part of a widespread series of crimes, including devil worship, cannibalism, drug trafficking, and CIA arms dealing. Okay? Larry King was a self-made bigwig, son of a meat packer. Pause. He claimed to have been offered a job singing for New York's Metropolitan Opera in the 60s. Alright? But preferred to make his way in the business world. After training in a bank, he took charge of Franklin Community in 1970, 2 years after the credit union was founded to provide consumer loans and other financial services in Omaha's minority neighborhoods. For 20 years, Franklin remained, as King later put it, my baby. Glib and energetic, King preached a bootstrap philosophy with much appeal amongst the business and civic elite here, as a profile in the Wall Street Journal once put it. He persuaded charities and other nonprofit organizations to deposit funds at Franklin as a means of boosting the city's blacks. One of his biggest supporters was Harold W. Anderson, publisher of the Omaha World Herald, who helped underwrite the remodeling of Franklin Main's office on North 33rd Street and plugged the credit union in a television commercial. King also had friends in Washington. When the National Credit Union Administration warned that Franklin was financially shaky 10 years ago, several Nebraska members of Congress fired off letters of support to the federal agency. The late Senator Edward Zorinsky, in a note obtained by the World Herald, even hailed King as a young man of integrity and one who has rendered great service to the total community. But according to a federal indictment and a lawsuit, King was rendering his greatest service to King. In 1976, King's chief accountant, E. Thomas Harvey Jr., discovered that credit union funds were being used to pay some of King's personal expenses. Not to be outdone, Harvey began paying his own bills with Franklin's money. He and King covered their track by drafting phony ledger cards at night, the indictment alleges, to fool federal examiners. King rubbed the cards on his office carpets to make them look older. By the end of the year, the credit union was short $400,000. Harvey and his mother, Mary Jane, subsequently pleaded guilty to embezzling $1 million and are cooperating with the boys. King, through his attorney, declined to be interviewed. Okay? The bombshell that didn't explode. When a story about key officials of the Reagan and Bush administration involved a call boy ring, the Washington Times in late June seemed poised to give this town the one thing it adores, a summer scandal. But as of last week, journalists has been left debating whether the Times published a blockbuster or a blockbuster, as one critic put it. The story is intriguing, involving male prostitution and a lobbyist who used parties to promote his business connections and business connections to promote his parties. But is it a government scandal or just a sordid slice of life in a city that happens to be Washington, D.C.? So here goes the article, Homosexual Prostitution Inquiry Ensnares VIPs with Reagan. Call boys took midnight tour of the White House. Okay? With the story about Washington. All right. Well, you heard in the video that I just played that this, the Secret Service, which investigates credit card fraud, was there to determine whether operators of the prostitution service were using customers' cards illegally. After the raid, the house remained cluttered with stacks of documents, furniture, and an odd variety of carved, stuffed, and miniature elephants, believed to be the collection of one of the tenants. When U.S. Marshals came to evict the tenants' belongings, the ownings and their lawyer, Mark Moskowitz, promised some reporters a chance to rummage through the debris. In many cases, Moskowitz agreed to give reporters access to the house if they would not mention the owners' names. 3 months after the raid, after U.S. Marshals swept furniture and belongings onto the sidewalk, Moskowitz gave reporters the walkthrough. When the journalists saw the documents, pages from ledgers, a diary, pornographic pictures or toys, he said they could take them. Reporters hauled paper away in boxes. It was like a garage sale. It was like a carnival atmosphere. Among news organizations that had reporters carting away ledgers and documents from the house, there were Washington Post, Channel 9, Channel 4. Moskowitz said he did not see a reporter from the Washington Times. No. Anyway, that's basically saying how they took all of this information, they got the goods, but nobody reported it. Okay? So now, here it goes, where the lobbyist who was linked to the scandal, Craig Spence, is found dead in a Boston hotel room. Keep this on your minds, that the majority of the bodies that I'm going to show you, the majority of the people that are killed in hotel rooms. Okay? The majority, Pimp C died in a hotel room. Prodigy died in a hotel room. The guy from Soundgarden or whatever died in a hotel room. Whitney Houston died in a hotel room. There's so many hotel murders. If you ever watched the movie, what is it? It was with what's the dude? George Clooney, right? Michael, what's the name of that movie? And they show you how they kill you in the hotel room. It showed how the crooked deep state does their work. What's the name of that movie? Is it Michael Clayton? Michael Clayton. That's another movie that you have to see. Michael Clayton showed you how they came in a hotel room. They put like a thing, the anesthesia over the person's face. Then they put them in a bathtub, and then they shot a poison through the bottom of their feet. Right? They shot an untraceable poison in the bottom of their feet. No, they put them to sleep on a bed. They shot the thing in the bottom of their feet. Then they put them in a tub, and then they put drug paraphernalia on the floor. Michael Clayton. Go and look it up. That's how they do hits and cover it up. Why Whitney? What you talking about? Huh? Whitney knew some shit. What you mean? Whitney had... Remember, they kill artists for their catalog. They kill artists who are trying to get out of their contract because dead rappers get better promotion. You understand? They killed her and had a fucking party for was it Clive Davis? Her body was in a fucking tub. They was downstairs having a party, and they knew that she was dead. They knew that she was dead. They tried to kill Kim Kardashian in a hotel, right? But a lot of people get killed in these hotels. That's where they call it suicide and all of these things, because in the hotel they're able to cover it up. Yeah, Michael Clayton is the movie. You got to check that out. Craig Spence, a high-profile lobbyist linked to a Washington sex scandal under federal investigation, was found dead after barricading himself in a hotel room, police said Saturday. Spence, 49, was found dead Friday in his room at the Ritz-Carlton after firefighters used a saw to cut the door in half. Spence had apparently barricaded the door with a bed. He was found fully clothed and there were no visible signs of injuries. Suffolk County medical examiner said Saturday an autopsy had been completed, but the cause of death was still under investigation. He said it could be weeks before his office issued a cause of death. Y'all know that them hotel rooms be having them other doors that lead to another room, right? Spence checked into the Ritz-Carlton on November 4th under an alias, the hotel director of public relations said. Spence was identified this summer by the Times as a major client of a homosexual escort service being investigated by the Secret Service, the District of Columbia Police, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for possible credit card fraud. Other clients of the call boy ring included minor officials of the Reagan and Bush administrations. Here goes the articles. DC homosexual prostitution ring is a big global story, but not in the U.S. It's all over the world, but they ain't talking about it in the U.S. They covering it up. All right, we're gonna come back. I'm gonna come back. Last Thursday's Washington Times story, because the media is the goddamn clients. Yeah, the media is run by the small hats. The small hats, that you don't want me to start on them about what they do with young boys. You know what I'm talking about? How they are the progenitors of a lot of homosexual practices because of the Talmud and the fact that they can't cheat on their wife. There's a loophole in the Talmud that allows them to have sex in one's anus. Okay, so henceforth, that's where the homosexuality comes from, because they can't shame themselves by cheating on their wives with another woman, but there's a loophole that says that you can have anal sex with either men, boys, or not women though. You know what I'm saying? So that's where a lot of them get their rocks off or whatnot. And then let's not get into drinking blood. Let's not get into the Aleister Crowley thing. Let's not get into all of these other things. But that's why you see the media, the quote-unquote Jewish-controlled media, has done everything in their power to cover up these scandals, because that shit will shine light on who they are and what they've been doing. And like I showed you the hierarchy of the pyramid, where they sit right there with the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, or the quote-unquote cracker, because they all got dirt on each other. And they all engage in all of this fuckery. You understand? They was doing it in Europe together. So nothing has changed.